Hey, I'm Dagny. Let's talk about Kente cloth, the US Congress, and terminology when it comes to identity of Black people in America. Okay? Now, this part of this is in response to a question from one of you. So thank you so much for sending in your question to me. It was in response to my other video about economic oppression. And the question was coming from a Ghanaian who wanted to know an explanation behind the responses that they saw online about Congress wearing the Kente cloth stoles. And the second part to that question was, what is the explanation behind why the titles Black American versus African American? What is the explanation behind why one is used and one is not? And does that connect to a attitude of wanting to claim Africa as their own or distance themselves from Africa? So thank you so much for that question. Let's get into it. So on June 8th, Democratic members of the US Congress wore Kente cloth stoles on their shoulders while they kneeled for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Now, the intention behind this gesture was to show a form of solidarity or support. That was the gesture, okay? Now, those Kente cloth stoles were gifted to those members of Congress by the Congressional Black Caucus. So they did not come out of thin air. Now, the response to this gesture was a field day in terms of established news as well as social media. Overall verdict was, it was an embarrassment, it was a mockery, it was a joke. You could read into certain responses kind of giving a nudge towards whether or not African culture is supposed to be in this conversation at all. Then there were other responses, which I retweeted or shared on my Twitter feed, where there are people who knew exactly, these are Black Americans, and these are Black people in the US who are descendants of Africans, who knew where Kente cloth came from and took note of where it came from and was like, Ghana's folklore board should get on this and sue America, because why are they bringing their culture in here to do this sort of gesture? And what I found interesting was established news outlets in the West were scrambling, of course, because you got to get this out immediately, right? We're scrambling to get experts to speak on, wait, what does Kente cloth even mean? Were they supposed to wear it or not? And I found it funny because the same two names were being quoted across the board. So I'm not sure if America only has two experts on this. Now, Congress doing this gesture, in the grand scheme of things, it's okay. But from the minute I saw it, even before seeing everyone else's response, I automatically saw that, your gesture, your good intentions are going to be drowned out by the negative response this is going to get. And here's why. Performative gestures of support are becoming more and more tired out. So the moment you do too much, it's going to backfire. For me, though, here's where I have to respond but that's not what we asked for. Other people kneel because they have no authority to actually make the difference. So all they can do, though, is raise awareness and try to get more people to talk about it and get more people to feel uncomfortable about it. Congress kneeling in the office where they have the authority to make a difference. That's why they were voted in or appointed, or they've been sitting there for decades. Why are you kneeling when you could have spent that time signing the bill, delegating the funding, etc.? It's tough, because you really can't please everybody. And in this age of rapid information, it's even more obvious and blatant that you're not pleasing everyone. But now those photos will forever be known as the real life Wakanda chess set. It's unfortunate. So maybe their heart was in the right place, maybe not. I don't know. I was not in the room when they decided to do this. And again, just added to the list of things that were not asked for. So with these sort of gestures, you really need to read the room. When you're seeing people blatantly showcase that, all of these protests started with police need to stop killing people, murdering people, and getting off. Change it now. And in response, we get, We are now going to create band-aids to match your skin color. We are now going to remove people who are not Black from being the voice actors for cartoon characters that are Black. We are now going to remove Aunt Jemima from pancakes. We are now going to wear Kente cloth stoles and kneel for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. We are now all church congregations to have the Black people stand on the stage while all the white people kneel and pray for forgiveness. You know, like all of these things are all gestures, some true, some performative. That's still, and it's like, okay, that's great. Thank you. Appreciate it. And, you know, I'm glad that this has started. You only write Black with a capital B. Great. Awesome. For sure. All of these things are making sure that this moment in history is never lost and never erased. But the initial demand and question, we need to stop the police from murdering and killing people and getting off. Does all of that really correlate with, and now we're making progress on that initial question or not? That is where the performative, what are you doing? We didn't ask you to do that. What are you doing? Comes in. Now, Kente cloth, there's a history in terms of its origins, and then there's a history in terms of its adopted symbolism, all right? Now, historically speaking, Kente cloth is from the Ashanti and Ewe tribes of what is now known as Ghana. They both have different ways of creating it, though, in terms of what the patterns in the fabric look like. Here is where things get dicey, which I noticed when people were trying to scramble to get information about Kente cloth, because some news outlets were saying, oh, you know, royalty and ceremonies and things like that. And then even Ghanaians were also sharing their own history of yo, this is actually something special to their tribe and to their culture. You don't just wear it, cry. It is the most widely known, over the entire globe, it's the most widely known African textile. Real Kente feels so luxurious, it is heavy, you know what I'm saying? It's not something, which is why it's not something you just wear, you know? It's really at the same level as in the West, a tuxedo and a ball gown. Kente cloth is at that level. And when you feel it, it's heavier than some of these tuxedos and ball gowns. Now, the adopted symbolism of Kente cloth in terms of America. Starting in the 1970s, Kente cloth had been adopted with a catalog of other symbols to be a way to showcase pride, Black pride, African pride. And later, students from HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, would wear these Kente cloth stoles as part of the graduation gown, garb, and then later just Black students all over, regardless of what school you're going to, they're wearing a Kente stole. There's another layer to its connection with Black America, where it's respected in terms of where it originated from, and it was taken on as so Black Americans who were stripped of their connection with Africa will reclaim it by wearing the Kente cloth. Does that make sense? And it's also utilized as a form of making an unspoken statement. For example, in 2018, when the President of the United States made a comment about African countries being a fill-in-the-blank whole country. During the State of the Union address, members of Congress, who are Black mostly, wore Kente cloth stoles while sitting there as their unspoken statement against or rebutting the president's remark. So there's an added meaning to Kente cloth in America that is not necessarily utilized the exact same way Ghanaians use Kente cloth. Now that we're talking about Kente cloth, it does make me think about wax print. There's a documentary called Wax Print that speaks about the origins of wax print and how it even got into Africa and whether it's really African or not, and as well as the current difficulties that local weavers and textile makers in Africa are having as their market is being flooded with counterfeit or copies or that are undercutting them. Copies of the fabric that are undercutting them in price and undercutting them in quality sort of things. You have like fake Kente being flooded in the market and things like that. But we're not going to go into that in this video. So you know what? I'll go more into that in the blog post for this video. Now let's get into the question about terminology when it comes to the different variety of identifications for Black people in America. I'm not sure, let me know. I'm not sure if this is the case in other countries, but in America, there is so much scholarly work around race versus ethnicity, and in particular around the re-identification of Black people in America who are descendants of Africa. I came across this post actually that I liked how she broke down the different titles. Her name is Bree, and I will link her Instagram information in the post for this video. So she's a PhD student and she talks about race and ethnicity a lot. The word Black, when you say Black people or say Black American, academically or officially speaking, that is a racial term for people who are African descendants who live in the US. And it's a racial term that kind of encompasses everybody who looks Black, regardless of their history and their heritage and their experience and their identity. That is kind of where a lot of the assumptions and miscommunication comes in, because racially America tends to, everyone who looks Black is just put in this one, oh, sorry. I got notes, y'all. Everybody who looks Black is put in this one monolithic, homogeneous group, completely erasing the complexities of the variety, in the spectrum of variety, when it comes to heritage, experience, history, identity, etc. And it fits into this ethnic, racial hierarchy that has always been in the US. The word Afro-American is utilized for people who are descendants of Africa who live in North America. So it doesn't necessarily mean just Americans who have afros. African American is utilized to distinguish people who are descendants of Africans who were enslaved in the US, officially speaking. Now, the word African American grew in popularity starting in the 1980s as a way to cultivate cultural identity, reclaiming a connection to Africa, and pushing away the racial identity, because the racial identity has like a permanent stamp in this racial hierarchy where Black is always at the bottom of the totem pole. And then finally, Afro-Caribbean is another term for those who are not Hispanic, descendants of Africa that are living in the islands. Within the Black community, there's quite a spectrum of opinions when it comes to what is my culture, what is not, what is my heritage, what is not. These are the official terms on paper. Speaking-wise, they're utilized interchangeably, and most people actually don't know the official definitions. Even I bounce back and forth between saying Black American and African American. I don't hide behind titles, if that makes sense, because I don't think they will ever fully encompass everything that I am. Black people in America who are descendants of Africans, who truly articulate that they have no business in Africa, who feel like Africans. So let me give you a scenario, all right? Let me paint you a picture of, in general, who the type of Black person who possibly would have given you that response. They themselves may or may not have ever visited Africa and probably don't plan to. Their overall attitude is that African immigrants come here with their money and their skill set to take jobs away from Black people. And then they turn around and tell their children to not hang out with Black Americans because they're bad news. To them, that is very hurtful, because they feel, one, it is true, they built America. And so they feel that, they built this democracy that everybody else can benefit from, except them, including Africans who immigrate to America. understand that that attitude is influenced by, one, how much of their identity and their well-being has been brutally stripped and beaten out of them, physically and mentally, for generations. And the way that was done through slavery, through Jim Crow, and through today, was to make sure that Black people hate themselves. And there is no rehab or magic pill for Black people to take to heal from that. But it bothers me because it's those sorts of responses are coming from a place of pain. There's no excuse. Of course, no. There is no excuse for them to be rude or insulting or even violent towards you if that was the case. It's coming from a really deep place of pain. That is self-destructive because it was implanted to do just that. I don't hold this as an excuse for it because thanks to technology, more and more information is accessible to understand that Africa's not your enemy. They've been suffering. Africa's been suffering too. This is where, as we continue to discuss how we need to heal the disconnect and the distance between Africa and its diaspora, education is really important. And we really need to do our part and make the effort for it because no one else is going to do it because so much of the information has been distorted and hidden and erased and destroyed. Now, let's flip it. Speaking to Black people in America who resonate with that response that Kente cloth is not my... There are a lot of assumptions that you are also responding to with that attitude. Not all of them were made by you. A lot of them were strategically put in place to make sure that Africans and their diaspora never really are a cohesive group that are on the same team, because if they were, it'll be much harder to maintain this level of oppression. And so Africans who are based in Africa understand African immigrants are also a fragmented group that sometimes may behave a different way in America than they do back home. The story of Africans immigrating to America does not align with the movie Coming to America. They are not all princes and chiefs and queens who come here to laud, to show off their wealth and be, above everything. Africans who are well off don't immigrate to America unless they have to go into exile because there's a coup or something. They stay with Europe and Dubai and that sort of thing. So majority of the time, the Africans who immigrate to America are hustling because economic opportunity is not where they're coming from at that moment in time. They are extremely hardworking, sometimes doing a lot of the jobs that a lot of you Americans don't want to do. And they make sure that their children go to school and their children speak English. And their children are the ones who pick up 2 or 3 degrees. And their children are the ones who not only have a professional degree, but also have a profitable side hustle. So don't scoff at the African immigrants' hustle. You may not know exactly what they also have to go through because there is a double whammy, I guess, or a double layer to it of one, you're hustling in a country that is not yours. So you have to learn the culture and learn how to work here and learn how to get things done and learn how to make that money, whatever, as you can. And then there's the added layer of there's racism, which they may not fully understand or have the knowledge of the history and all the nuances behind it, but they know that color of skin is some sort of problem. So they try their best in any way they can to try to live with it and avoid it. It is true for some, a way of doing that is to distance themselves from Black Americans, to make sure that non-Black people know, I'm not one of them, I'm from Africa. So be careful of making assumptions on that regard as well. That is my take on Congress, Kente, and the whole terminology. I hope you found this helpful. Make sure to go to my website, dagnyzenovia.com, where the blog post for this video, I shall elaborate on the historical terminology and symbolism of Black pride, as well as some of the work that I mentioned, like the wax print documentary and Bree Daniels' take on ethnic and racial identities in America. Thank you so much for that question, and let's keep it going. So I want to hear from you. Again, we have 2 questions and you answer them depending on how you identify as. For one group of people, I want to hear, comment below and let me know what you would like to know or like to understand in terms of the Black American or African American experience, and what do you wish Black Americans and African Americans understood about you? And then my other group of people, what would you like to know or understand better about the Ghanaian experience or the overall general, if there's something in general you'd like to understand about Africa or another country in Africa? And what do you wish Africans understood about you? Comment below so we can actually make this a series. This is fun. Thank you so much for watching. Be safe. I'll see you next time.